Good afternoon. My name is Merle Johnson, and I'm a proud 40-year retired Cleveland school teacher. Welcome to my favorite place, the City Club of Cleveland. I'd like to begin by sharing a poem with you that I found on a blog called Free Minds Book Club and Writing Workshop. This blog is written by incarcerated members. The poem says, "We are only human." We as people always make mistakes, not understanding the consequences until it's too late, and never thinking about the risk that we make until that day comes when it's too late. We are only human. No one person is perfect, wishing we can take back what we did, knowing it wasn't worth it, hoping and praying for a second chance at life, and forgiven for something that won't happen twice. We are only human. Why consider me a monster without even knowing me? Looking at me from my mistake by continuously scolding me. I feel a great deal of remorse for my mistake, but when looking into your eyes, all I see is hate. All I see is punishment, and the quality is great. We are only human. I read this poem because the line that says, hoping and praying for a second chance at life, is what today's forum is all about. Ex-offenders, returning citizens should not have their mistakes shoved in their face. They should be celebrated for the power of reinvention. I'd like to introduce now our moderator to you, Mr. Charles C. Mr. Charles C. is Vice President of the Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry in Cleveland, Ohio, and the Executive Director of the ministry's Community Reentry Program. Mr. C. has been involved in providing community-based corrections programs for youth and adults for more than 50 years, and he has done it very well. I could say a whole lot more, but because of the time limitations, I'm going to introduce to you Mr. Charles R. C. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson and I go way, way back a long time, back to the old community. So it's a delight and a pleasure to be here. And I want to add my words of welcome to those of Ms. Johnson. This is indeed a very important forum. I want to thank Ms. Johnson and her Special Programs Committee for bringing this to the attention of the City Club. It is certainly an idea whose time has come. We have a great many individuals with us in the audience today working to improve the lives of returning citizens. I'd like to extend a welcome to the Community Reentry President Board Chair, Reverend Jeremiah Price, and the CR Board of Directors. I'd also like to say hello to all my staff partners at Community Reentry and at LMM. We also have with us the CEO of Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry, Ms. Carol Frederick, and the LMM Board President, the Reverend Richard Gall. We're delighted to have you folks with us. United Pastors has been gracious enough in joining us this afternoon, and it's good to see you there. They have an extraordinary amount of work going on in the reentry community. This is an important dialogue. We're happy that all of you are here. Being here at the City Club, for me, I cannot help but think of and be reminded of longtime City Club member, supporter, and friend, Mr. Seth Taft, who recently made his transition. Would you please join me for a moment of silence in remembrance of Seth? Thank you very much. As you have no doubt already observed, we have a very distinguished panel with us today. Each of our panel members has an extensive resume evidencing numerous civic accomplishments and academic distinctions. In the interest of time, I've taken the liberty to abbreviate their resume, but rest assured that each of these are quite worthy of note in and of themselves. But I will tell you just a little bit about each of our panel members. We have the Honorable Nancy A. Fuerst, presiding judge of the Court of Common Pleas. Judge Fuerst has served on the Cuyahoga County Court in the General Division since January of 1997 and is its current presiding and administrative judge. Judge for the Cuyahoga Court of Common Pleas. Prior to her election, she engaged in the general practice of law, handling civic and criminal offenses and also practice at the trial appellate level. Over the years, Judge Fuerst has served on many judicial, civic, and legal committees and community forums. Judge, thank you. We also have the Honorable Shirley A. Smith. Senator Smith was elected to the 21st Senate District of the Ohio Senate in November of 2006 after serving 8 years in the Ohio House of Representatives as a state representative for the 10th District in Cleveland. She's been a strong advocate for the poor, minority, and disenfranchised across the state of Ohio. Senator Smith has demonstrated her genuine concern for the socially and economically disadvantaged, not only through her advocacy work, but with her outspoken candidness. She's also passed many bills and offered many bills introduced into the legislature advocating for this population. Next to her, we have Mr. James Walker, Jr., a formerly incarcerated citizen who served 30 years in prison, during which time he earned a Bachelor's of Specialized Studies degree from Ohio State University. Released from prison 6 years ago, Mr. Walker successfully completed 5 years of parole supervision last year. A few weeks ago, he graduated from Cleveland State University with a Master's of Art degree in English. Today, Mr. Walker is employed at Lutheran Metropolitan Ministries 2100 Men's Shelter. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our distinguished panel. Thank you. Some 5,000 individuals return to Cuyahoga County each year from federal and state prisons. These returning citizens have served their sentence and in many cases paid restitution and reconcile with their victims. They return to a community seeking a second chance and deserve one. When Senate Bill 337 was signed, Senator Smith said, and I quote, "This legislation eliminates barriers to employment, and it reminds society that ex-offenders have a place among us. It will benefit thousands of rehabilitated citizens who have paid their dues to society and want to move on their way and change their lives." Plain Dealer, June 26, 2012. Let's begin with our questions to the panel. Our first question goes to Senator Smith. Senator Smith, your work within the Ohio legislature to reform Ohio's criminal justice system is legendary. House Bill 337, recently signed by the governor, is being called the Collateral Sanctions Bill. Can you highlight a few salient points of the bill and tell us why you felt the bill was necessary?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Charles. Let me first thank you for inviting me to be here to talk about an issue that is near and dear to my heart, an issue that I certainly have passion for, and also an issue that has been the core of my legislative career. I have watched this issue evolve since I've been in the legislature. It has taken on a different form and of course, a different nature. It is one that we have worked very hard to educate people on, and we are looking at it differently, and therefore we are beginning to treat it differently. In looking at this issue some 15 years ago, I didn't realize that there were so many people affected by prison reform, or I should say not prison reform, but collateral sanctions and incarcerations. People who could not get jobs, people who couldn't get grants to go to school, people who could not get public housing. It was an issue that lawmakers just it wasn't even on their radar, because it was an issue that didn't get them elected. So they didn't address the issue of prison reform or collateral sanctions. But since, and you know, another point, people who I talked to who are facing these myriad of problems, there were people that were 15, 20 years out of prison that could not get their records expunged or were facing these problems. So when I looked at this problem, realized that there were so many people affected, I started working on this issue, and since then time rolled on and it has been a journey. However, Senate Bill 337 came along, and one of the provisions that I talk about most, because it has my footprint on it, and that's the expungement piece of the bill. And prior to 337, a person could get one felony or one misdemeanor expunged from their record. With Senate Bill 337, a person can now have 2 misdemeanors or 1 felony and 1 misdemeanor expunged from their record, considering that they're nonviolent offenses. Now, people with felony 1s or felony 2, those are the most heinous crimes, being murder, kidnap, or incest, or sexual kind of offenses. They cannot be expunged. A person would have to actually be out of prison, well, in order to apply, at least 3 years to apply for a felony offense and 1 year for a misdemeanor offense. Senate Bill 337 also has another provision that I am absolutely crazy about, and it is called a CQE. And a CQE is a certificate of qualifications for employment. And what that means is a person can apply through the court or through the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections for a certificate. And what that certificate is it's almost like a stamp of approval from the courts and from the Department of Rehabilitation, saying to a potential employer, we have vouched, or we are vouching for this person. We are asking you, Mr. Employer, Mrs. Employer, to give this person a chance. It also allows for people who have been to prison and now want to be a barber, studied barbering in prison, a person who has studied to be an optical dispenser, a person that may be an electrical or plumber. Well, I don't know if you know this, but electrical people and plumbers and HAVC people who went to prison who want to come out and own a business prior to this bill could not. Now we are allowing these people to get businesses or occupational licenses to open those businesses. Another thing that the bill does is it offers to people who have gone to prison and stayed in prison 12 months or more the opportunity to have their child support modified. So if you go into prison and you're CPA and you come out, or accountant and you come out, you may not have that same ability to get that same amount of money that you did when you went in. So, or earning capability, I should say. So when you come out, we allow those people to modify the child support order. In addition to that, it also, we sometimes at the legislature take away the court's discretion, as you very well know. So we've given the courts more discretion in this bill to give people discretion in nonviolent crimes and child support when they commit a crime. So those are just some of the provisions of 337.
Good. Thank you very much, Senator Smith. Now, our first question for Judge Fuerst. Judge, your advocacy as a progressive judicial system reformer is well known by state practitioners as well as others in the field. Can you tell us what the role the courts will play in implementing House Bill 337, and why do you feel such a bill was needed?
All right. Thank you, Charles, for that kind invitation. Before I respond, I want to tell you how what a pleasure it is to serve with you on the community-based correctional facility boards. We meet once a month, so I see Charles regularly. He is always there. And Senator Smith, I've seen you in action in Columbus, and I applaud the voice that you give to those who are really underserved and whose causes are not popular and are not moneyed. There's no money involved. And James, congratulations on your success as well. The court will have the role to adjudicate what has come as a result of this bill. Senator Smith has talked about the easiest and probably the most immediate change is the expansion of not the first-time offender, but now an eligible offender for purposes of expunging or sealing a record. We see those already, and we've seen an uptick in that. And the senator has talked about the expansion, that it allows more people to come in and have the opportunity to have their records sealed so that they can move on in a more productive way. Those records, by the way, are kept, however, if there are special boards or law enforcement agencies. They don't disappear completely, but they're kept in a sealed place and are available in certain instances for review. The second part that affects the court is the certificate for qualifications for employment, and it is a very tough bill in one way to implement. So they came up with administrative rules over the months past, and I must applaud the senator. She is setting up informational sessions to not only explain the process, which is a little difficult, I think, but but not undoable, and to enlist the help of lawyers, the legal aid community, and the public defender to do this. What happens is that we, administratively, we are having the ex-offender, after a year in the case of I'm sorry, 3 years in the case of a felony and 1 year in the case of a misdemeanor, they can apply through a portal and fill out an online application, which is about 16 pages, but it walks you right through that process. That online application is then reviewed by the Justice Reinvestment Office to make sure that everything is in place and that all the pieces and parts are there to complete it appropriately for filing. The person who applied is then notified, and they can come back, print out the application, and then go down to the court and file it. They can file it in municipal court, but also in common pleas court. Now, there is kind of a scary fee. It's a civil filing, so it's a $250 filing fee. However, one who probably doesn't have the money to pay that fee should not be discouraged, because they can file an affidavit of poverty or affidavit of indigency, and there'd be a $10 charge, which probably could even be waived as well, but there's a nominal charge. The court is then responsible. They receive the filing, the case is assigned to a particular judge. The judge is required to notify or to conduct a pre-sentence report, notify the probation department, who will prepare that background check and report. As a result of that, if there are convictions in other jurisdictions, the court is then duty-bound to notify them and to give them 15 days to respond, whether they approve or disapprove the continuance of this application. After that's all done, then we will have a hearing. And we're not quite sure if there'll be a probation report prepared with other factors beside a record check, but what we will need in that hearing is some material offered by the applicant to show us that granting this certificate will allow them to obtain employment and occupational licensing. Second, the court is going to have to decide whether this person has a substantial need for the relief requested, and then granting the petition does not create an undue risk to the community. So those findings are the ones that the court will make in a full hearing. That is, we will probably have a prosecutor there. I suggest that either a public defender or someone be there on behalf of the applicant, so that they can have the full benefit of being properly represented. It'll be an important thing. The court then will have to make a decision, and that decision is appealable to the Court of Appeals. But in that decision also, the court, if the court grants it, the employer who is presented with this certificate will be able to enjoy an immunity from the claim of negligent hiring in this person. So the court is taking on quite a bit of responsibility in making its findings. But that's what we'll have to do. Whether or not it works, I think we have a few in the pipeline right now, so we're going to watch. The bill needs a little tweaking as far as making it easier to use, so in a year we will go back to the legislature and make whatever changes need to be made. One of the other important pieces, that's the process. One of the other important pieces, I think, that this whole issue has raised is for defense counsel to make sure that they notify their clients, that they advise their clients when they are at the beginning of the case, when the case is either being pled or being charged, that the defendant is looking at particular collateral consequences or sanctions as a result of entering a plea or being found guilty of a particular crime. So I think we can, I think that raising this issue, this Senate bill, has heightened our awareness about what the duties of the defense counsel will be in the front end of the case as well. So
that's very good. Senator, it looks like you've given the court some additional work to do.
Absolutely. It's another unfunded mandate, but we're happy to do it. So.
Okay, let's go to Mr. James Walker Jr. Mr. Walker, your hard work, personal diligence, and determination to successfully re-enter the community epitomizes what a formerly incarcerated person can do if given a second chance. As a returning citizen, tell us what difference you think House Bill 337 is making for those returning to the community and seeking a second chance.
Thank you, Mr. C., for those complimentary comments. Thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. Thank you to the City Club for having this important discussion. And thank you to everyone here for showing your interest in this issue. You know, I've done a number of these type of discussions in the time that since the time that I've been back in the community. I've kind of taken on the notion that I have a responsibility to speak to the reality of this experience we call reentry as I know it. As I know it through my experience, as I know it through of the experience of the literally thousands of others, ex-offenders that I have engaged since I've been out of the system. You know, I absolutely applaud Senator Smith, as I said to her before we started today, for her work on this bill. I applaud her for succeeding to the extent that she has. And I will also tell you that I said to her that it should come as no surprise to her that, as far as I'm concerned, the bill does not go far enough. You know, I have to speak to that reality because I know it too well. And I don't want any of my comments to be construed as ultimately negative or critical. I want folks to understand that there's another side to this conversation that usually is not heard and not engaged. And when any of us with this experience try to speak about it, in most cases, you know, our views are, you know, put in a certain place. Let me say it like that. Okay. I am absolutely humbled and even honored to be in a position to bring that other voice to this conversation. My absolute desire is to do it in a thoughtful way and to do it in a respectful way. As far as how this bill is helping, I say that it is much too early to say. I say that, you know, the final administrative process hasn't even been worked out yet. I also say that the bill has a number of inherent elements that will minimize its impact as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, up top, first and second degree felons are ineligible for any relief in terms of the CQE or the expungement provisions. I think that that is a moral issue for us. You know, if we're going to talk about second chances, if we're going to talk about being human beings, if we're going to talk about, you know, a path to reentry, then why are we closing doors? Okay? So I have to speak to that. Also, I will say that the other provisions, when it comes to driver's license suspensions, child support adjustments, those kind of things are wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And as far as I'm concerned, those are the greater, the most impactful elements of this whole legislation. Now, as I said to Senator Smith, the larger issue remains inadequately addressed as far as I'm concerned, and as far as most people with this experience are concerned. I think that a more fruitful course for us when it comes to employment begins with the EEOC. The EEOC has published guidance regarding exactly what the law is when it comes to discrimination against people with backgrounds. Now, I pose a question to the room. How many of you actually know that it is against the law for an employer to refuse to hire someone solely on the basis of a criminal background. Do you know that? Do you know it? So if it is against the law, then let's talk about enforcement of the law. Okay? That's where my real attention goes. And I think that over the long haul, nationally, locally, I think that that's where the greater progress is to be made. The EEOC, to its great credit, has done a great job in updating its guidance, in clarifying it, and I think that we would be very well served to educate employers regarding the proper use of criminal background checks as opposed to the improper use of criminal background checks. We would be very well served to educate this population of people coming back into the community about what their rights are, how to recognize discrimination. Remember, in the days, in the civil rights movement, people who were discriminated actually had to be taught how to recognize discrimination and how to respond to it. This population of people, of marginalized people, have to be taught the same thing. And we need to be helping this population to seek its just approach, to seek a fair opportunity. And so I will cut my remarks there.
Okay. Well, good. And, you know, when you started your remarks, Mr. Walker, you indicated that you were hoping that they would not go to a particular place. But let me assure you that in this room, they will not go there. And you were selected for this panel because of your thoughtfulness. So we greatly appreciate that. And, you know, and there's been some conversation about the bill, but it's like my dad used to say, many strokes overthrow the mighty oak. So this is one of those strokes that we hope that will eventually bring down that tower of discrimination. So it's a good start, and as you indicated, it needs to go further, but Senator Smith has got us off to a real good start, and we greatly appreciate that. For a second round of questionings with 2-minute responses, and I'll go with Judge first. Why do you believe, Judge, you've been such an advocate for criminal justice reform, and you've been outspoken about the way we ought to be treating folks? What do you think the community's role ought to be in according second chances to people returning to the community? What should we be doing to
Well,
do
there are
that?
probably a couple things. Number one, on the community side of things, we want the community to understand that the person that we're dealing with here has paid their debt to society. They've done the tough part of their time, as it would be, and we would hope that there would be some consideration of not just hiring, but even mentoring. You know, we call it networking. I don't know with the ex-offenders. I mean, do you call it networking or mentoring? You know, that's an important part, even if you don't have a record to deal with. We hope that they would maintain an open mind about ex-offenders and consider their personal positive qualities and talents. There are some very bright, self-motivated, and talented ex-offenders who can do anything that anyone without a record certainly can do. And we need some kind of a forum to make sure that that individual is able to be seen within the community. We need to decide if it's good public policy to establish some level of support with the government to create that forum, that place where the ex-offender can go and transition into the community. Some mechanism to partner with private job makers, the private sector, integrating educational and vocational opportunities. Those are all little steps along the way that lead you to a more productive and stable life. And it's good for the health not only of the individual but also the health of the community. And we see a lot of that at the CBF where you and I serve on those boards. And I think also the community should provide this forum to encourage good contacts, stable influences, and associations for the person who's coming back into the community and really needs to be in the right place and along the right path. So it's important that somebody help create that environment for the ex-offenders. For the ex-offenders, there's some responsibility and some realization about the toughness, and James has talked a little bit about that. The ex-offender has to come to terms about their past and what it means and the stigma that attaches. They might be best served to prepare themselves to explain to someone their transformation. Here's where they're going, here's where they've been, but here's where they're heading, and here are all the steps that they're taking. They also need to internalize that transformation. You can't just say it, you have to believe it. So whatever it takes, James, you probably can speak more to that than I could. You have to be prepared in real life to accept rejection and not to let it push you back, but to, even though you bump against it, to move to the side and continue to move forward in your life. You need the responsibility to stay away from those triggers, those bad associates that lead you off to backtrack in the wrong direction, and to try and obtain the skills and take the time and the work and the education, because a lot of it, there's nothing fun or sexy about it. It's just a lot of work to obtain those skills that you need to succeed in life, even when you don't have a record to deal with. So.
You know, that's good. In the community reentry, we talk a lot about personal responsibility, and as you pointed out, Judge, that's going to be twofold. Certainly, the community has a responsibility, and we're encouraging and moving the community toward that. Right. But then the individual, they have some responsibility as well, and if we can, and as we bring those two elements together, then we start getting a returning citizens that really have a second chance.
And I have to say, in my many years on the bench, the thing that impresses me is not that someone is in trouble. It's how do they react to that thing that's happened to them or that they've caused in their own life. How do they address the mistake that they've made? Do they move forward? It's the response that's more important. And I think if the community sees that someone really tries, even though it's going to be difficult, it's an uphill battle, I think you can the community can respect that. And if there are other people around who are kind of, you know, helping and offering the support.
Right, exactly. I remember reading a headline once that said, every felony offense does not a bad person make.
That's
good. Yeah. Next question for Senator Smith. Now that House Bill 337 has passed, what additional legislation might you feel is needed to continue to move the reform forward? And what can we as a community do to support that kind of legislation, Senator?
Charles, let me first just to Mr. Walker's point about people who cannot apply for CQEs. Anyone can apply for a CQE, whether they have a record or not. I just want to make that distinction so people won't think that because you have a felony or you can't get your records sealed, you cannot apply for a CQE. Everybody can apply for a CQE. And also to your point, you'd be very surprised with me, but I agree with you. You know, I do agree with you. We haven't done enough. But I think in the climate in which I work, I think that I'm going to get what I can and run. So that's a reality. So, but it's people like you that continue our work. If you don't continue to speak out for those things that we don't feel are justified, then our work will stop. So I want to thank you for your attitude and the way you feel about it, because it is certainly a good one. The thing I think that we need to work on most, and we are starting to do that in the legislature, is to get these private employers to remove that box on applications that ask if you are or you ever had a felony. Because everybody should have that chance to walk in the door and prove themselves. You know, because you get a different perspective of a person when you see them face to face and you talk to them. And what I've learned is some of the best workers or employers or employees are the people that have felonies on their record or have any kind of offense on their record. And just for our own knowledge, I do like to refer to them as returning citizens because I don't like to define a person and call them an ex-con or ex-offender, excuse me, Judge, but I do like to refer to them as ex-offenders. The other thing I think that we can do is get authority from the federal government to do our own background checks and to authorize or not authorize and make sure these background check companies are doing the right thing, because a lot of people, when they get their records expunged, these background check companies are still showing them as people with records. So if we don't get an arm around, our hand around, our arm around these background check companies, we're going to continue to have these problems. So I think that is an area in which we should step in. And another area that we're looking at in the legislature, we're talking about it, is that after a person commits a crime, it should just drop off after so many years. They shouldn't have to go through all this bureaucratic stuff, you know, to get their records sealed. So I think that's the direction that we're moving in, and it's going to take a lot in that climate, but we'll keep working at it.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree with you. I think that, especially with the CQ, and it's not a criticism, because the reality is the senator, worked this legislation, with not a lot of support. I think there was a lot going on in order to make the deal that you got. But clearly, to create any more obstacles or to make it difficult doesn't really help us. So I agree with your remarks.
And one more thing, the people keep saying, I've done it, but it is something I worked on for 15 years, and it is a passion of mine. But there's so many other people that's been out here working. I know Charles C. has been out here working like crazy. I mean, the first time how many years ago, 15 years ago, he heard that I was doing this, he's reached out to me. I know there are two judges, Judge Sonnenberg and Judge Dick Ambrose. They've been out here forever, and they've been doing these forums all around the city. So it's just not me. I don't want to take all the credit. Believe me, I want to. No problem, but I have not been the lone person in it, so I just want to make that known. But thank you.
Judge Sonnenberg's staff attorney is here today, and she's done a lot of the legwork. Abby Greiner, so, and Nadine Nasser, my staff attorney as well. So they work together, and they get a lot of that gutsy work done. So.
And speaking of other folks being here today, I was just looking over in the corner. You got Jim Lawrence from Oriana House, and with his staff partners, Mike Randall and Elliot McGee, who operate the CPCF for the county. And you got Jim Hardeman sitting back there, who's been a reentry advocate forever and ever. So this community is well saturated with good folks that have been fighting and struggling to bring about this reform. And Senator Smith, we want to thank you certainly and give you the credit that you are due, along with the rest of the colleagues you've mentioned.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Let's give our panel a round of applause. Today, at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a special program featuring a panel discussion on removing obstacles for returning citizens with panelists Judge Nancy Fuerst, Ohio State Senator Shirley Smith, James Walker Jr., and moderated by Charles C. We will return to our panel momentarily for our traditional City Club questions. We encourage you to formulate questions for our speakers now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. Tomorrow, Friday, May 17th, the City Club welcomes David Walker, founder and CEO of the Comeback America Initiative and former United States Comptroller General. Friday, May 24th at noon, the City Club will host Sandy Cutler, CEO of Eaton Corporation and member of the steering committee for Fix the Debt. For more information about our upcoming forums, please refer to our website, www.cityclub.org. If you wish to make reservations for upcoming programs or order a CD or DVD of today's program, please call 1-888-223-6786 or 216-621-0082. We welcome guests today at tables hosted by Community Reentry Program, Merle Johnson, Lutheran Metropolitan Ministries, and United Pastors in Mission. Thank you for your support. Now, we would like to return to our speakers for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Special Program Committee members Ellie Sullivan and Nicole Braden-Lewis. And please keep your questions brief and to the point. First question, please.
Good afternoon, there, panelists.
Good afternoon.
My question is for Mr. Walker. When you were speaking, You spoke about background checks and the proper use of the same. Would you care to elaborate on what you think the proper use of a background check should be?
My comments are related to what we've seen from the EEOC in terms of their guidelines. As I recall, they talk about the nature and the seriousness of the offense, right? I think there are three major considerations. The nature and the seriousness of the offense, the amount of time that has passed since the offense was committed, and whether or not that offense behavior is directly related to the duties of the job sought.
Yes, Mr. Walker, I appreciate the candidness of your comments. Would you give us 3 wish lists for your public policies that would impact reentry?
Great question, big question. We don't have enough time to talk about it. But,
brief version.
right. Again, well, let me add something to what I said. Any approach to the employment issue that does not treat entrepreneurship is lacking. Okay? I don't care what we do in terms of legislation or public policy. There will be a segment of this population of offenders that will not be well received. Okay? While 80% of all startups fail within the first year, is it? There are still people, there are still members of this population who are quite capable of creating and sustaining their own businesses. And we should be encouraging that. Number 2, we should have something of a Marshall Plan almost in educating this population, again, about how to recognize discrimination and how to respond to it. Okay? When I engage this population does not know that it is against the law to be denied employment solely on the basis of their background, regardless of their offense. You know? So we need to be dealing with that. And I guess number 3, I would like to see more engagement of the business community by the powers that are in terms of encouraging employers to look again at some of us who have made sometimes terrible mistakes, but who have also given ourselves to that personal reinvention and recreation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all. I would like to follow up on 2 comments that one Shirley Smith made and Judge Fuerst with regard to removing misdemeanor complaints from your record, just letting them fall off. Years ago when I was practicing law, I actually represented a veteran who picked up a misdemeanor in England. Had to get in touch with the courts in England, found out that those misdemeanors do fall off after 5 years. They just don't get reported anymore. How difficult will it be in a year or so when we go down to Columbus to talk to the legislature about including that into our wish list of things we want to see happen? Or do you think it's even something we can include, Senator Smith?
That has been a conversation in Columbus. We are talking about it, but there are so many conservative people in Columbus that we don't know how far it will go, but that is a conversation that is brewing.
And Senator, you remember 15 years ago, that was the first conversation we had when we were talking about a sunset law.
Right.
So it's an idea that continues to take hold, and I'm delighted to hear that they're doing it in England. I think we need to find out, more about what's going on there. But eventually, I think we're going to have to get to that.
I agree with that. Maybe the opportunity will be now that we have this expanded version of the expungement law that we could show some empirical evidence that, in fact, these are coming off anyway. Right. So that might be something that might persuade the legislators to reconsider at some point in time. But That would make perfect sense. And
It is getting closer.
yeah.
It is getting closer.
We have a question on the floor.
Yes. This question is for Senator Smith and maybe even for the judge. Is the ability to modify the child support retroactive? I have a client, a former client, who's been out of prison for at least 3 years and is struggling under trying to pay the arrearage on their child support. So how can that person still at this time apply to get their child support modified?
Now, I don't want to say yes, but I don't know if it's retroactive. That's what I don't know. So we'd have to check into that.
You know, and one thing I'm delighted to hear, and this was incorporated in the first discussion of the bill, we're talking about modifying it. We're not talking about eliminating child support. We must support our children, and we certainly advocate that, but we want to be reasonable and civil as we approach that whole effort.
Mr. Walker, I would like to know, as a pastor and a new pastor in the inner city, what are some things that you think, having been there and done that, that the church can do to assist in reentry?
Great question. I appreciate that very much, and welcome and congratulations, right? The church has a very huge role to play. The church is playing a very huge role. Our churches, particularly in our community, right, our churches have been at the heart of our life forever. And there are a lot of resources in our churches, in many of our churches. I would like to see our churches mobilize those resources to create jobs. Let me say that in the county of Cuyahoga, anyone who needs services, for instance, mental health services, drug addiction services, that kind of stuff, they can get that stuff, okay? Budgetary issues are always in play, but this community is well served by service providers who do that kind of stuff. So one of my issues is, why are we committing dollars earmarked for reentry to services that are already being fairly well provided? Let's create jobs. And, you know, we get into this debate about what's more important, jobs or housing. Well, I'm here to tell you, you attach me to an income, I will find housing.
Question in the back?
Senator Smith, 337 is a remarkable accomplishment, and I was wondering if you could comment on the climate of the legislature and if they would be open to additional type bills and projects, or are you simply a miracle worker?
Well, both.
Yes to the miracle worker.
Yeah, the climate in Columbus has changed, and there are people that really care about this issue, and they are as passionate as I am about it. However, since the prison walls and doors are busting open with people, we have over 50,000 people in our prisons right now. Maybe 6, 7, 8 months ago, that amount had gone down, but now we see an increase in the prison population. So yes, they will and they are receptive to more ideas, because what we found out is the money that we're spending in prisons is not only ridiculous but absolutely crazy. And we can save ourselves so much money if we do the right things, and the right things are just doing things that are evidence-based programming. And we found out in doing that, those things work. And it's better to do those things that work than spend a lot of money that's not doing anything. So yes, we are more receptive.
And if I could just tail on that, the court is moving in that direction in its sentencing with evidence-based, which is a huge shift in the way of thinking. We want to use those resources on those who need the programming, as it would be, yes. And not bother with those who will become involved in the system maybe 1 or 2 times. We don't want them mixing with a more serious criminal, because the lower risk person becomes worse in contacting. So sometimes you're better off with a risk assessment, the lower end person, let them correct themselves. You watch them, you supervise them, but you don't have to pour a lot of resources or supervision time in. For those who need more, then that's what you give more. I just want to talk about housing, though, is a huge, huge piece of that. A stable place to go is fundamental. You know, that unit, your family unit, if you don't have one of those and you have no place to go, well, you're going to float around for a long time with, you know, at risk for a lot of things. But also, in Ohio, and I think it's worth mentioning, in Ohio, they've taken on this risk-based, evidence-based approach now. In our recidivism rate in Ohio, even though we have and institutions are full, is way below the national average. 45%, I think, is the national average. I've heard as low as 37%. We're in the high 20s, 28 or 9% recidivism rate. They're seeing that programming in Ohio, the evidence-based implementation has really works.
And since Cuyahoga County commits more persons to the state prison than any other county, I'd like to attribute that reduction in recidivism to the kind of work that's going on here in Cuyahoga County. We've got a pretty extensive reentry coalition going on and significant service providers that are trying to address that. There's a question.
Senator, it is well known in the United States that we have more people behind bars and in prison than under community control than any other country in the world, in our free country compared to those countries that are less free. Shouldn't we just be taking laws off the books, fewer and fewer laws? I think Moses emphasized only 10, wasn't it?
Who is that man?
I don't know.
You know, I don't think taking laws off the book will get people elected.
I'd like to, right. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a question on the floor.
Yes, I'd like to first of all commend Charles C. for the extraordinary work that he's done in the community with the Community Reentry Program. I'm a former offender and a former employee, that is, of Charles C. I am in the doctoral program at the Black Studies Department at the McCreary Center through Ashland Theological Seminary, and I'd just like to thank you, Charles C., for the start that you gave me. I still remember that motto, people more readily act their way into a new way of thinking than think their way into a new way of acting. Yes, and once you start doing things different, then you'll start thinking different. But this question is to Senator Smith. And I wanted to know, what is it that we can do as a community to help change the laws for the career criminals, which I was a career criminal, or the more habitual criminals, or those that are career criminals, or those that are violent criminals in the community, because those are the ones I think that really need the help to keep them, to keep us all safe in the communities. And I think that that would be something that I would want to become involved in with the meetings, if there is open meetings for the community, and in particular former offenders.
Well, I don't think that we try to change laws to help those people. I think what we need to do is focus on helping the people themselves. We need to provide them with the services they need, wraparound services. We need to make sure that they have the right support, the support system in place. We have to make sure that they have housing, make sure that they have the medication that they need, and those things help that individual. Now, there are some people that just cannot be helped, but I think the majority of those people can if we provide them the right services.
Question.
Senator, I was wondering, I know you said you've been working on this for years. Really, how have you approached the employers, and how have they reacted? And what are we going to do moving forward to try and improve that reaction?
Well, one of the first things that I did was approach employers, but employers were afraid of the liabilities. And so what we did this time around is we changed up sort of what they say somewhere else. We flipped the script on them. we put a provision in this bill that will protect them against negligent hiring. So now employers can hire returning citizens without being afraid of a lawsuit. So we have dealt with that problem. The only issue that we face now is employers are just not educated enough, and they won't open up to look at these issues to see if these people can be hired or if they will hire them, because they're afraid of the lawsuits. And then they look at people once they go to prison as always being a criminal. So we have to educate them to let them know that this is just not the case.
Excellent. And one of the things I'd like to encourage, you as an audience to do, where you shop at, what is the policy of the companies that you do business with regarding hiring returning citizens? And what happens if you stop in some afternoon and say, I'd like to speak with your manager. What's your policy about hiring formerly incarcerated individuals? And, and see what they have to say. And you might make it known that you encourage that because of what you understand about giving folks a second chance. Would go a long way. They hear from folks like us all the time. But when they start hearing from their customers, people that are genuinely concerned about giving folks a second chance, I think you're going to see some different responses begin to take place where you do business at. Was there another question on the floor?
Thank you very much, panelists. Some of us who've been hearing some about this topic have learned a great deal already today. My question is about criminal background checks. I'm sort of been amazed or aghast that I've seen criminal background checks that show charges from years ago that have had no conviction, no nothing, just a charge, no indication of what happened to the charge. And how that can show up on criminal background checks, how that's legal is kind of my question. I don't know who might be able to answer it.
We deal with that issue, and that is a problem, especially in today's technological world, because the minute something hits our system, our felony system, it's swooped up, it's out there. Even if you seal the record, there's no way to go back, grab that, and pull it back. So it is absolutely a problem. I think what we really need to do is avoid the situation. Make sure that before perhaps cases that could remain in municipal court, which aren't as serious, they're serious charges, but they're not as serious as a felony charge, perhaps good decision making at the front of the line so cases don't enter that felony system if they don't have to. The implementation of diversions and intervention programs for drugs and things like that. But you're right on, because it's an absolute nightmare. It's a problem.
And if I understand the law correctly, you can, in those misdemeanor cases, you can also go back to that court and ask that those records, that those charges be removed. If there was no conviction, you can just ask them to seal. Yeah, you can seal that record as well, which we encourage folks to do.
Mm-hmm.
Very quickly, let me remind you that in Ohio, returning citizens can vote. We do have voter registration set up in the lobby, so if you're not registered, please make sure you do. Also, I want to announce Senator Smith has an expungement clinic on May 23rd at Cleveland State. We have flyers on the voter registration table. Today at the City Club, we have been listening to a Friday forum featuring Judge Nancy Fuerst, Ohio State Senator Shirley Smith, James Walker Jr., and moderated by Charles C., discussing removing obstacles for returning citizens. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This program is now adjourned.
Good.